My dad said I didn't deserve a wedding, so I wrote a book about growing up with him, made a fortune, and bought the house he lost. Then I invited him over as a guest. I always knew my dad and I had a complicated relationship. He was the kind of father who kept score, who remembered every mistake you made but forgot every success, who gave love like it was something you had to earn, and even when you earned it, he'd find a reason to take it back. But I never thought he'd go as far as he did. I never thought he'd publicly tell everyone that his own daughter wasn't worth investing in, and I definitely never thought that his cruelty would become the thing that made me rich enough to buy everything he lost. I got engaged when I was 26. His name was Marcus, and he was everything my dad wasn't. Kind, supportive, patient. He treated me like I mattered, like my opinions and feelings were valid. My dad hated him from the start, but I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I was happy. When we started planning the wedding, my mom pulled me aside and told me I should ask my dad if he'd help pay for it. Traditionally, the bride's family contributes, and my parents weren't struggling financially. My dad owned a small construction company that did pretty well. They lived in a nice house. They took vacations. Money wasn't the issue, but I was nervous to ask. My dad had this way of making you feel small whenever you needed something from him, like you were a burden, like asking for help was admitting you were weak. Still, I asked. We were at a family dinner. My mom, my dad, my younger brother, and me. I brought it up casually, said Marcus and I were planning the wedding and we were trying to figure out the budget. I asked if he'd be willing to contribute anything. My dad didn't even look up from his plate. He just said no. I thought maybe I hadn't been clear. I explained that we weren't asking for everything, just some help, maybe a few $1,000s. Anything he felt comfortable with. He put his fork down and looked at me. And then he said something I'll never forget. He said I'd made my choices, and those choices had consequences. He said I'd picked a man he didn't approve of, and if I wanted to marry someone like Marcus, I could pay for it myself. He said he wasn't going to waste his money on a wedding that probably wouldn't last anyway. My mom tried to defend me. She said that was harsh, that this was my wedding, that he should want to support me. My dad turned on her too. He said she babied me too much, that I'd never learned the value of money because she always bailed me out. He said I needed to grow up and stop expecting handouts. I left that dinner in tears. Marcus held me in the car and told me it didn't matter, that we'd figure it out on our own. And we did. We planned a small wedding. We cut costs everywhere we could. My mom secretly gave me $2,000 without telling my dad. It wasn't much, but it helped. The wedding was beautiful. Small, but beautiful. My dad didn't come. He said he had work. My mom came alone and cried through the whole ceremony, but not in a happy way. In a sad way. Like she was mourning something. I thought that was the end of it. I thought my dad had made his point and we'd just move on with our lives. Him in his world and me in mine. But then, about 3 months after the wedding, my aunt called me. She said she needed to tell me something. She said my dad had been at a family barbecue, one I wasn't invited to, and he'd spent the whole afternoon talking about me. Not in a nice way. He told everyone I'd demanded he pay for my wedding. He said I'd thrown a fit when he said no. He said I was entitled and spoiled, that I'd always expected him to fund my life, and he was glad he finally put his foot down. He said marrying Marcus was the biggest mistake I'd ever make, and when it all fell apart, I'd come crawling back, asking for money again. My aunt said she tried to defend me, but my dad wouldn't hear it. He turned me into a joke, a cautionary tale about ungrateful kids. I hung up the phone and I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't sad anymore. I was angry. No, I was furious, because it was one thing for my dad to refuse to help me. It was another thing for him to lie about what happened and trash me to our entire family. That's when I decided I was done protecting him. I'd always been a writer, not professionally, but it was something I loved. I kept journals. I wrote essays. I had a blog where I posted stories about my life. It was small, maybe a few hundred followers, but the people who read it seemed to connect with what I wrote. After that phone call, I started started writing about my dad, not in a cruel way, but in an honest way. I wrote about what it was like growing up with a father who made you feel like you had to earn his love, about the little ways he'd cut you down, about how he'd praise my brother for doing the bare minimum but criticize me for not being perfect, about the ways his words stuck with you. Even years later, I wrote about the wedding, about how he refused to help and then lied about it, about how he made me feel like I wasn't worth investing in. I posted it on my blog. I didn't expect much, maybe a few comments from my usual readers, but something weird happened. The post went viral, not huge viral, but bigger than anything I'd ever written. Thousands of people read it. They shared it. They commented with their own stories about difficult parents, about feeling unseen and unvalued, about the ways family can hurt you in ways nobody else can. A few days later, I got an email from a literary agent. She said she'd read my post, and she thought there was a book in my story. She asked if I'd ever considered writing a memoir. I hadn't. Writing was just something I did for fun, but she said she thought publishers would be interested. She said there was a market for stories about complicated family dynamics, about daughters breaking free from toxic fathers, about finding your own worth when the people who are supposed to love you refuse to see it. I thought about it for maybe a day. Then I said yes. The next 6 months were a blur. I wrote every day. I wrote about my childhood, about the ways my dad's criticism shaped me, about the wedding, about everything. It was painful. There were nights I cried while writing, nights I wanted to quit because reliving it all felt too hard, but I kept going because this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every person who'd ever felt like they weren't enough for their parents, every person who'd been told they were a disappointment, every person who had to build themselves up from scratch because the people who were supposed to support them refused to. When the book was finished, my agent sent it to publishers. We got offers, multiple offers. We went with a mid-sized publisher that really understood the story and had a good marketing plan. The book came out about a year and a half after my wedding. It was called Never Enough, and it blew up. I'm not talking small success. I'm talking bestseller lists. I'm talking book clubs and podcasts and interviews. I'm talking foreign rights deals and movie options. The book hit a nerve with people. They saw their own parents in my dad. They saw their own struggles in mine. I'm talking foreign rights deals and movie options. The book hit a nerve with people. They saw their own parents in my dad. They saw their own struggles in mine. Within 6 months, I'd made more money than I'd ever imagined. Enough to quit my job. Enough to pay off my student loans and Marcus's student loans. Enough to buy a house. And that's when I found out about my dad's situation. My mom called me one day. She sounded stressed. She said my dad's business was in trouble. He'd made some bad investments, taken on some projects that fell through, and now he was drowning in debt. They were behind on their mortgage. The bank was threatening foreclosure. She asked if I'd heard anything about it. I hadn't. My dad and I hadn't spoken since before the wedding. Not a single word. She said she didn't know what they were going to do. She said they might lose the house I grew up in, the house my dad was so proud of. I didn't say anything. I just listened. And after we hung up, I made some calls. I found out the bank was absolutely going to foreclose. My dad owed way more than he could pay, and they'd already started the process. The house was going to auction in 2 months. I talked to Marcus. I told him what was happening. I told him I had an idea, but I wanted to know what he thought first. He asked what the idea was. I said I wanted to buy the house. He was quiet for a second. Then he asked if I was sure. He asked if I was doing it to help my parents or to prove a point. I told him honestly, I didn't know. Maybe both, maybe neither, but I knew I wanted that house. I wanted the place where my dad had made me feel so small to become mine. Marcus said if that's what I wanted, he supported me. So I did it. I contacted the bank. I made an offer. It was below market value because of the foreclosure situation, but it was more than my dad owed. The bank accepted. My dad had no idea. The bank handled everything. He didn't know who bought it until the sale was final, and he got the notice to vacate. My mom called me crying. She said they'd lost the house. She said some buyer had swooped in and purchased it, and now they had 30 days to move out. She said my dad was devastated. I asked her if she knew who bought it. She said no, some LLC. She couldn't find any information. I told her it was me. She went silent, completely silent. For like 10 seconds, she didn't say a word. Then she asked why. I told her the truth. I told her I'd made enough money from my book to buy it. I told her I wanted it. I told her dad had made it clear I wasn't worth investing in, so I'd invested in myself instead. And now, the house he'd been so proud of was mine. She didn't know what to say. She asked if I was kicking them out. I said yes, but I told her I'd give them 60 days instead of 30, and I'd help her find a rental if she needed it. She just said okay and hung up. My dad never called. Not once. But I heard through my brother that he was furious, that he couldn't believe I'd done this, that he was telling everyone I'd betrayed the family. I didn't care. He'd already told everyone I was a disappointment. At least now I had a house to show for it. My parents moved out 2 months later. My mom stayed in touch. My dad didn't. I renovated the house. I tore down the walls that made it feel small and dark. I painted everything. I brought in new furniture. I made it mine. About 6 months after the renovation was done, I decided to do something I'd been thinking about for a while. I invited my dad over, not as family, as a guest. I sent him a formal invitation in the mail. It said I was hosting a housewarming party and he was welcome to attend. I didn't call it his old house. I called it my home. He didn't respond, but on the day of the party, he showed up. He looked older, tired. He walked through the house like he was seeing it for the first time. He didn't say much. He just looked around at all the changes I'd made. At one point, he asked me why I did this, why I bought the house, why I invited him. I told him I bought it because I could, because I'd built something from nothing, the same way he always said he did. I told him I invited him because I wanted him to see that I didn't need his approval or his money to be successful. I told him I'd done it all on my own, and I was proud of that. He didn't apologize. I didn't expect him to. He just nodded and left about 20 minutes later. My mom stayed. She told me the house looked beautiful. She told me she was proud of me, and she told me she was sorry. Sorry for not standing up to my dad more. Sorry for not protecting me better. I told her it was okay, and I meant it, because I didn't need protection anymore. I'd protected myself. The book is still selling. I've written 2 more since then. My career as a writer has taken off in ways I never imagined. Marcus and I are happy. We're talking about starting a family, and I live in a house that used to represent everything my dad thought I couldn't achieve. People ask me if I regret it, if buying my dad's house was too far, if I should have just let it go. But here's the thing. I didn't do it to hurt him. I did it because I deserved it. I deserved to take something that represented my childhood, all the pain and the criticism and the feeling like I was never enough, and turn it into something beautiful, something mine. My dad said I wasn't worth investing in. He was wrong. I was the best investment I ever made, and now I have the house to prove it. Success isn't about making people who hurt you feel bad. It's about making yourself feel proud. And I do. I'm proud of what I built. I'm proud of the life I created. And I'm proud that I didn't let his words define me. He said no daughter of his deserved help. Turns out I didn't need his help. I just needed to believe in myself. And now, every time I walk through the front door of this house, I'm reminded that I did. Subscribe if this story hit home for you.